Alright guys, as you saw in the last video, we've got the 370 engine out. It's sat behind me somewhere, and as you can also see behind me, Bryn is here to help. That's him doing a weird ass dance. He's going to be here all weekend, and we're going to try and just plan everything out, like I said at the end of the last video. We're also going to get the 350 engine out and put that in the 370 and see where stuff sits and see what we're going to need in terms of custom mounts and all that stuff. So let's push this out of the way and get started.
Absolutely no exaggeration here. It's like 8:30 and this engine is still in the car. So when it goes into this car, hopefully we're going to simplify this a lot. I mean, what we've got to do to actually lift this out, because there's no factory lifting points, still means it's quite an ordeal. But hopefully if you don't have to disconnect and remove literally everything under the sun, it might make things a little bit quicker. I'm hoping that we can find some other places to lift off of.
Like fucking where?
I don't know, but I'm hoping,
They're the only two bolts.
I'm hoping. Yeah, I mean, they might be alright. There might be something else on the back that we can get at.
There
or
isn't.
the side. I will find something so that I never have to do this again. And this grand old pile of shite is what we're going to try and simplify in version 2. All of this had to come out, and in some form or another, all of this has to go back in again.
That's not even like anywhere near all of it either, is it really?
No, there's some over there, there's some over there, there's some over there, there's some still in there. It's fucking endless, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look, there's some of it.
Some
you have to take the intake manifold off to get the engine out.
I mean, I don't
Why?
That's not what Nissan intended.
No, it's not what Nissan intended. Nissan intended for you to have like an entire workshop that you could take the subframe out the bottom. Anyway, we're going to get the engine out now, aren't we?
I mean, it's like 9 o'clock at night, so it's about time we did the job that we started at, what, midday?
Kill me.
Right, so I can't remember what the last thing that you guys saw was, but we've got the engine in. It sits quite nicely on the engine mounts. We've got the gearbox on, and we're just trying to figure out exactly how to make the gearbox mounts fit, because we've had to swap the 370 mounting point on and the mounting bracket because the 350 one was nowhere near. So we're just trying to figure that out. And we're also just about to try and put the prop shaft in, probably the one from the 370 because that's shorter. So we're going to stick that in now and see if that fits. So the prop shaft's in, and it fits perfectly. So that's one worry down. We're still messing about with getting the gearbox mount on. Originally we had an issue where this just sat like way too low. And what we found was that we had to swap this part. I know you probably can't see it very well because it's dark under here. This part, in fact I'll show you. Yeah, this flat part here, they basically just made it kind of drop off a little bit sooner. So it just starts to taper down earlier, which is a really random, weird change. But you need to have that version of it on there because this one starts fouling on the top of the transmission tunnel before you can get everything in place. So that's a really odd thing, but luckily it's just those 4 bolts, so we could take them off and just replace that one part easily. So yeah, the final puzzle really with the gearbox is getting these bolt holes to line up. So it's super close to these lining up, but just not quite close enough that you can get all 4 bolts in. So we're just drilling a couple of these holes out just to make it so we can move things around a little bit more easily and get exactly where we need them. So with a bit more filing and drilling, we got those in, and now the transmission is nicely mounted. We've also taken the stock fuel tank out and all the stock fuel lines as well, taken all those out. These are just the brake lines that are left, which are also going to get replaced at some point. But yeah, stock fuel tank's gone because, well, actually I'll show you what turned up today. This is what turned up today. Radium fuel cell. It's got an integrated swirl pot inside it, and the fuel pumps are inside it as well, so it should be a lot quieter than the old setup. It's a lot smaller and lighter than the old setup, and like I say, with the integrated swirl pot, that means hopefully we won't have any more issues like we did at the last round where we're getting some fuel surge issues. We've got a load of stuff like the fuel level sensor, and I'm going to make my own filler neck coming off this basically, and there's vent lines and stuff like that. There's plenty of stuff that's going to happen with that, which you'll see in another video, but I just wanted to at least show you guys that it has arrived. Anyway, now we're going to go look at where we're going to mount the turbos. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the new front bumper on, Nismo front bumper. Don't know how well you'll be able to see that on the GoPro actually, but yeah, Nismo front bumper. We're not going to be having any headlights. We've obviously not got a radiator because that's in the back. So the things that we need to fit in here are 2 turbos, 2 exhaust manifolds. You can see the old ones, maybe you can't see, but the old ones are in there. Obviously they face off that way because we used to have the turbos down in the gearbox. This time they're going to be at the front, which I thought would make life really easy and really simple, but it's still proving to be a bit of a pain in the ass. So yeah, intercooler, which we've made this mock-up of the dimensions that we're looking at. So intercooler is going to sit just forward of that bar there and just about level with it. So that'll sit about there like that. Yeah, intercooler will go there, power steering cooler and oil cooler in front of it. We'll chop a little bit out of this bumper. So yeah, we've got to have exhaust manifolds come from there to this side of the turbo. Then we've got to have a downpipe come off there. And at some point on the exhaust manifold side, we've got to have the branch that comes off to go to the wastegate, and then the wastegate screamer pipes. We've got to have the compressor outlet go down and to the intercooler, and then we've got to have an air filter feed into this. Then of course you've got oil and water lines as well. The oil lines that come off the bottom are quite big, so we've got to obviously leave a little bit of space for them, especially if they're going to tee together and go into the sump. So yeah, we've been through loads of different versions of where these are going to sit, which way they're going to be oriented. I'll talk you through some of the failed attempts so you can see why we've settled on the way we're doing it. One other thing to point out as well is that we're going to be cutting the chassis legs off about here. So all this will be gone. They'll be replaced with a 38mm tube, because that's the largest size we're allowed to run as per the BDC specs. Anything forward of the suspension mounting point, the largest it can be is 38mm, and then anything 300mm behind the front bumper, or within 300mm of the front bumper, can only be 25mm diameter tube. So that's basically your bash bar. So yeah, this will all be gone, but there will be a tube in there that still takes up a bit of room, just a fair bit less than what this does. We're going to cut all this out as well. I've actually already started doing that on this side, so got rid of all that stuff and a bit of this, and we'll probably get rid of all that, but for now I'm just taking that bit off. And basically we started off with the idea of the turbos sitting somewhere around here, maybe a bit further back, or whatever. You get a rough idea. So yeah, probably something like that, a bit further back. This would move as well, but yeah. That was the original plan, but we very soon realized that just wasn't going to work for a lot of the exhaust side of things. For the compressor side, it's fine, but the exhaust side of things, there was no way to fit everything in. So we decided to switch to having them sideways, so something like that. Have the air filter in here, that can rotate down, get to the intercooler really easily. Exhaust manifold can come to there nice and easily. And the downpipe is the problem though. And the main problem with the downpipe is that we want to fit a silencer in. Now I know that sounds shit and you're like, no, make it loud. Problem is, noise regulations got stricter last year and they're probably only going to get stricter going forward. So I think we need to make room for a silencer. Even if we don't end up running it and just run a straight through pipe instead where the silencer is going to be, we need to plan for a silencer to begin with and then take it out, rather than not have room for a silencer, turn up to the first event, fail the noise test and just be like, well, fuck, now we've got to remake the entire system, because you can't just move a turbo, you've got to remake all the manifolds and everything. So yeah, I'm playing it safe here and having a silencer to start with, so that's what's causing us a lot of problems. The other thing is, I really want to do a bonnet exit, either bonnet exit or floor exit, any way that stops the exhaust going back down there and all the way through the back of the car. For 2 reasons. One, it's going to save a lot of weight. Like, think of all the metal in an exhaust that goes from here all the way to the back of the car. That's going to save a fair amount of weight. And secondly, I just want the car to look a little bit more mad and like have something interesting going on, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want it to just look like a stock 370 with slightly wider arches. So yeah, bonnet exit is preferred. Screamer pipes I think we're going to make go down just to help with noise, because we're not going to fit a silencer in screamer pipes. Screamer pipes can just point at the floor. Again, that makes them a little bit quieter. So to try and fit a silencer in here, we've been through loads of different ideas. The original plan was come out of the back here, do a 180 down, go through there, have a silencer sort of horizontally somewhere through here, or have a silencer in here and do another 180, go back under again, and then do 90 and come up. As you can probably tell, there's not really enough room to do all that. Like, it would have looked cool having all sorts of snaky bends everywhere, but there's just not enough room to do that, especially with the size of silencers. I mean, I can make my own, but I'd rather buy an off-the-shelf one that actually does a much better job than what I would do. So that plan quickly died out. We tried turning the turbos the other way around, so with the exhaust out on this side, and then just doing like a 180 in here and having a silencer come up and out here. Which almost worked, but just again the room that the 180-degree bends and the silencer take up, when you go onto full lock, the wheel starts to hit stuff. It'd pretty much be touching the bumper. Wasn't working. So now we've gone for kind of a hybrid between the two, where we're going to keep them this way around, have it come out here, do a 180, go under there, and then come up and out here. And that kind of solves a lot of the problems. Probably have the silencer in this like vertical bit here, or come quite far out and then have a horizontal silencer before it bends up and goes out here. Either way, it should work. Like, it should be a fair amount of room there to do all that. And we still get that kind of nice snaky looking exhaust on this side. We still get a bonnet exit, and it kind of solves all the problems. The only downside of this is that we've got really hot exhaust downpipe quite close to the intercooler. Now, we'd obviously separate them as much as we can, so we'd have this as far back as we can get away with without it starting to interfere with any belts or anything like that. And we'd have the intercooler as far forward as we can get it, and probably have some kind of heat shield around this as well. The downpipes will be ceramic coated, just like the manifold was before, so that will help a bit as well. It's still not ideal, I know, having something that hot, that close to an intercooler that's trying to cool air down, but it kind of seems to be the best of all the different options we've got. And then, of course, there's other stuff that's going to get in the way as well. Like, we're going to have a massive coolant line coming off here that needs to avoid this downpipe. We've got this that needs to not get super hot and not be right on top of the turbo. So that's going to have to bend around and then come out of the intercooler at the middle here rather than at the end. What other challenges are there? There's plenty of other challenges. Oh yeah, the wastegates, they've got to come off somewhere before the turbo. So they're going to have to come through here, avoid the power steering pump, which we've moved. I don't know if you can tell. You probably can by the fact that that belt looks fucked. Power steering pump used to be over here, but to give us more room to get the manifold through this gap, and we've moved that, because otherwise we were just trying to get it through this tiny gap here and it wasn't very nice. So we got rid of the power steering pump, moved it lower down here. Obviously we'll have to make a whole new belt setup and add some idlers and stuff like that. That'll be a whole project on its own, but pretty confident we can do that. And we're going to remote mount the reservoir, because that at the moment sits right in the way of where this exhaust would want to come up. So we'll put that over where the battery used to be, because we've got loads of space now there, and put that over there and then just run the lines to get to here somehow. I know we'll figure that out. I've ordered a few different like tightnesses of bends, so we can see, you know, which ones are going to work best, which ones are going to fit best, which ones look too restrictive. And so when they turn up, I can properly like get this finalized, where this is going to sit and where everything's actually going to fit. But yeah, until then, I think we're going to go play around with the rear radiator stuff. Right, so we're just mocking up where the rear radiator is going to go. Obviously, it's not going to be laid down like that. It's going to be sat upright. Yeah, more like that. So we're just trying to figure out, you know, how this hose is going to go around the roll cage, stuff like that. And we've actually got quite a lot of room to play with back here, so we're not really worried about any of this. It's one of the nicer parts of the build, isn't it, so far? Because everything else is tight and awkward. This, we should be fine. We're just figuring out exactly where the electric water pump's going to go, because we're going to have the stock water pump still, and then the electric water pump helping get the fluid back to the engine. We're trying to route the AN lines and stuff, which is these massively thick, girthy boys. AN20 we've gone for. So we've got to figure out how to get all that through the cabin. That's what these aluminium lines here, well, aluminium tubes are going to be for, is to either go through the passenger footwell or underneath. We haven't quite decided that yet, so we're trying to plan all that out. We're also deciding whether we're going to have a swirl pot in line in the coolant system somewhere, where we're going to have the turbos, like boil their coolant over into, and a lot of coolant-y stuff. So yeah, we'll crack on with this, let you know what we figure out.
So that's your rough system that we're going for. So
with some slight changes.
Yes, swirl pot into the radiator, an outlet of the radiator into the water pump with a header tank teed into it. So I'm thinking swirl pot over there where that line comes up, into the swirl pot, swirls round into the top of this radiator, water pump there, the header tank tees into it, possibly header tank up here so it's nice and high and easy to get at.
Yeah, because that's going to have like an air spring in the top of it, so does that need to be the highest point of the system then?
Yes, so we want nice big header tank, lot of volume and a lot of gap for the air at the top, and that will always be less full, but it always wants to be the highest point so that any air that's pooling up is going to pool up there. You can control the air spring amount then.
Yeah, which is easy in the rear radiator setup, isn't it? Because we've got all this vertical height to play with. Exactly. In the front, it was quite hard because you start hitting the bonnet.
It didn't work in the front, and we always got airlocks everywhere else.
Yeah. Right, so what we had on the 350, for reference, we had this kind of semi-swirl part. I mean, I tried to make it swirl, right? I welded the things on at an angle so they would swirl, but because there are only dash 4 lines, it didn't swirl. When you take this cap off and look in, there's nothing swirling. Right, so that basically is purely for the turbos. When you turn the car off, the turbos just boil all the coolant that's in them. So that was literally just a place for all that coolant to go. Like, so these 2 lines were just coming off the turbos and going into there. It was just for that to sort of boil and catch all the air bubbles basically in there. But because it wasn't quite high enough and wasn't quite big enough, it just filled that whole thing straight away all the time, and then it would overflow out of the cap into here, and then because this wasn't quite big enough, that would just overflow onto the floor, and then we'd end up with no coolant basically. Well, not no coolant, but a
bunch of air in here every time.
Yeah, so then after everything had got mega hot, the next time you drove it, there would just be airlocks everywhere and it would be shit. So that's the kind of problem we're trying to solve. So we're gonna ditch that basically and have that as a big header tank.
Yeah, well this is going to be very similar to what it is, but much larger in the back. You still have this, which is your coolant into, so that goes, like, top up the system, and then all the vent lines will go into this.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of it, and you know, we'll have a bit of this shit going.
And then rather than that going into an expansion tank, that will just basically bleed to atmosphere, won't it?
So it'll be, you know, say this full or something, and that should always be air.
Yeah, and then any excess pressure, it just bleeds off the extra air pressure, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the plan. Find out in like 3 months' time whether that actually ends up happening.
I think this will be a much better system than version 1.
So that's pretty much it for this weekend of planning. Bryn's just headed home. And yeah, we didn't get as much done as I hoped in terms of planning and finalising things, but that's kind of my own fault for not being further on with taking the 350 engine out in time for Bryn getting here. And we basically had to waste an entire day just taking stuff off that car and getting it in here. But at least we have got the engine, gearbox all in and mounted now. We know the prop shaft fits. We've got no worries with any of that stuff, so that is good. But yeah, that's going to do for this video. I'm not going to like strictly stick to one a week. I'll probably be a couple this week because this one's been relatively short. Well, I don't know, actually, by the time I've edited all my waffling earlier about the turbo setup, maybe not so short. But yeah, like I said, I'm waiting for exhaust bends to turn up so I can finalise all that stuff. So I think the next video is probably going to be focusing on all this shit you can see in here. All the dash stuff, all of the wiring that I can't wait to rip out because look at it. So yeah, that's going to be fun, taking all that out, getting all the steering column a lot more sort of empty and just gutting the entire interior of the car. So that'll probably be the next video, along with hopefully finalising the turbo position and cutting the chassis legs off. So yeah, look forward to that and I'll see you there. There we go. Oh, that wasn't as bad as I was expecting, I'll be honest. When I did this, it went like all over my face and everything. Because I'm shit, as he says.
There you go, now we can pop the...
Pop. Oh, now you fucked it.